Welcome to SVG-TV News for Thursday, January 28, 2021. I am Rochelle Batiste with the details. Opposition leader Dr. Godwin Friday is questioning where the government would get the money from to be spent in 2021 to finance capital programs with a projected decrease of current revenue. In Parliament yesterday, Finance Minister Camilo Gonzalez presented the 2021 budget estimates of revenue and expenditure amounting to $1.2 billion, which represents a 2.2% increase over the approved budget for 2020. He said that the projection is that in 2021, current revenue will amount to $647.4 million, which represents a 4.8% or 32.7 million EC dollars decrease below the amount budgeted in 2020, noting that the deterioration in revenue performance in 2021 is reflective of the slowdown in real economic activity that they project for the year and the tax policy stance taken by the government as a consequence of the pandemic. The opposition leader Dr. Godwin Friday, however, said that despite the projected decline in revenue, the government continues to present false expectations to the people.
That is 21% of the overall budget is unfunded. Last year the number was, I think, about 17%, so it's gone up. So it is false. It is dishonest to put in a budget that you're going to spend $1.2 billion when you can't say where you're going to get 258 million of that. And the lie shows up in another way too, Madam Speaker. Tell me, why is it that in the estimates, the minister says that we will spend $317.4 million on capital projects? Yet, in the same document, the capital revenue is projected to be $565.2 million.
In addition, Dr. Friday pointed to 40% of the revenue being used to service the country's debt and another 60% for payout for salaries and other government expenditure.
What these figures indicate is, one, dishonesty on the part of the government, but two, that the government is essentially broke. Unless you can tell me how you're going to find $50 million to pay those costs that you have to, because you got to pay salaries, you got to pay the debt. To service the debt now takes about 42% of the current revenue to pay for the debt. That a larger and larger portion of that is being used every year to pay the debt, which tells us that the debt has become a serious matter for us. If 42 cents of every dollar must go just to deal with that, and then you have to cover salaries, wages, and pensions, which is again over 60% of the money that you collect. Those two things have taken all the current revenue.
The opposition leader asked that the finance minister be more transparent with the figures presented, noting that while he is aware the COVID-19 pandemic poses numerous challenges, he wants to know if the government has run out of money or is expected to raise tax to cover costs.
Where does that money come from? Is it through abusing the overdraft facility? It is time for the minister to level with the people and to say how he will pay for those costs. It is time for honesty and transparency. Is the government broke? Are we in for the hard times? It is not just the uncertainty that he spoke of this morning of COVID, everybody knows that. Or is it just the hole that we have dug for ourselves over the years, where now it is so deep that even our heads can't be seen above it? Or will they increase taxes? We have to wait to see next week. Are they going to borrow more money? As they did last year, they took some of the idea loan and paid off some of the debt.
The 1.2 billion budget estimates for 2021 was approved by Parliament last evening after a lengthy debate. Minister of Finance Camilla Gonzalez said the estimates were prepared with the people in mind. He said it strikes a balance for the immediate and long-term plans for the country, noting that the many challenges posed by climate change, the COVID-19 pandemic, and Lasso volcano were considered.
So this budget, these estimates, spend money on COVID, on the health front. Spend money on COVID, on the social protection front. Spend money on COVID, on the economic recovery front. But also spends money for the day after COVID, when we have learned to live with it or we have moved beyond it. When there's a time now to focus not on the number of cases, but on how we can improve lives and livelihoods and return to the path of accelerated developmental progress and prosperity. It's all in the same book that was derided by the members of the opposition.
Minister Gonzalez said that he wished if the budget was more than $1.2 billion to meet the needs of the people. He said that he understands that everybody is facing problems as they have been impacted directly or indirectly by COVID-19. And while the budget is not perfect, it is the best it can be.
Is it perfect? It can be perfect, especially in this time. Revenue is collapsing around the world. Our revenue held up last year will not hold up as well this year. Your money going down, but your needs are greater, more urgent. That's a short-term reality that we have to deal with. In a small island developing state, faced with COVID, faced with a volcano, faced with climate change, faced with infrastructural challenges, faced with young people who need to get back to work. You have to craft a balance.
Responding to the opposition claims that the estimates are not transparent, the finance minister said there are no untruths in the document.
And I believe that these estimates of revenue and expenditure are honest, not dishonest, transparent, not misleading, creative, not boring, solution to the challenges that we face. I hope that we recover better and faster than some of these projections say. And there was debate in the ministry about how quickly we will emerge. Even now, the World Bank says less than 1% growth this year. The IMF says 4% growth. The ECCB is somewhere in the middle because the projections are all over the place. I hope it's on the high end.
In the morning, during the question and answer period, the finance minister told Parliament that the COVID-19 pandemic has resulted in the closure of 420 businesses in SVG, which caused 2,754 persons to be unemployed between March and December last year. Responding to a question by opposition MP Fitzgerald Bramble about the pandemic's impact on businesses, Minister Gonzalez used data recorded by the National Insurance Service, NIS, to answer the question.
That 2,754, that set of employees are employees of the closed businesses. There are other employees who have been not laid off, but put on reduced time schedules, particularly in the hospitality sector, reduced hours and the like. They're also receiving compensation through various income support measures. But in terms of the subset that the honourable member asked for, it's 420 businesses. And more businesses than that have been affected in terms of limited hours and limited staff and the like. But the question was about closure.
Minister Gonzalez highlighted measures that the government has put in place to reduce the impact on businesses through the approved supplementary budget in April last year.
Moratorium programs, over 700 business accounts took advantage of the loan moratorium programs, and over 2,400 loans enjoyed moratoria. some of those additional ones were businesses, even though they did not have business accounts. So at a minimum, 700 businesses took advantage of the loan moratorium. Number of concessions granted on COVID-related products. There was a suspension of some revenue measures that were agreed and passed during the previous budget. There were small businesses received considerable support. There was a prime program. The supplementary estimates provided additional monies for the prime program, while close to 1,000 prime recipients have gotten support in the last year.
In relation to the Buckermans Bay Resort that will be taken over by Sandals International, the finance minister said that the EC $30 million loan agreement that the government entered into last August for the purchase of the resort has been repaid. Minister Gonzalez was responding to a question in Parliament yesterday by opposition leader Dr. Godwin Friday about the status of the transaction with Sandals and whether the loan was repaid as promised. Said that the loan was repaid on November 27th, 4 days after receiving the funds from Sandals International.
$30 million loan was contracted with the Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines for a period not exceeding 5 months at a rate of 5% per annum. This loan was disbursed in 2 tranches of $13 million on the 28th of August 2020 and $17 million on the 15th of September 2020. The proceeds from the loan were used to pay the trustee in bankruptcy, the 50 villa owners. There are 50 owners of 54 villas, and to compensate the farmers who were to be relocated and resettled on other lands. The loan amount was repaid in full plus interest on the 27th of November 2020. The loan was repaid from proceeds of the second installment of the $30.3 million received from Sandals Resorts in the week of the 23rd of November 2020. So we received the money on the 23rd, and we settled the loan on the 27th of November.
In some COVID-19 related news now, St. Vincent and the Grenadines yesterday confirmed 29 new COVID-19 cases. The National Emergency Management Organization, NEMO, said all of the cases were detected during contact tracing and testing at flu clinics. This brings the total number of local COVID-19 cases to 686, the majority of whom are linked to various clusters. 9 persons have recovered, bringing the total number of recoveries to 174. 651 cases remain active and 2 persons with COVID-19 have died. 827 cases of COVID-19 have been reported in SVG since March 2020. NEMO said all positive cases will remain isolated until cleared. All close contacts of known positive cases should contact the flu clinics in their district to arrange testing. It said these close or primary contacts must remain in their place of quarantine until receipt of their results. All residents and visitors of St. Vincent and the Grenadines are reminded of the importance of consistently wearing facial coverings to protect themselves from being infected with the virus which causes COVID-19. And the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force is commended citizens who have been complying with the COVID-19 protocols that have been implemented by the government to combat and contain the spread of the coronavirus in the multi-island state. In a news release issued today, the RSVG Police Force said it has noted that while the vast majority of persons have been wearing a face mask as advised by the authorities, there are those who choose not to, especially some conductors working on public omnibuses. Noting that the coronavirus is highly contagious and very deadly, having already killed over 2 million persons globally, including 2 persons here in SVG. The RSVG Police Force said in light of this, it strongly encourages all citizens, including omnibus drivers, conductors, and passengers, to wear a face mask in an effort to reduce the spread of the virus. The force said the public must be reminded that it is a criminal offense to engage in activities that can cause the spread of an infectious or contagious disease in SVG. Quoting Section 291, Chapter 117 of the revised edition of the Laws of St. Vincent and the Grenadines 2009, which states any person who unlawfully or negligently does any act which he knows or has reason to believe to be likely to cause the spread of any infectious or contagious disease is guilty of an offense and liable to imprisonment for 1 year. The RSVG police force also noted that the police have the power to enforce this piece of legislation and will, if it becomes necessary, so to do, and reiterated its appeal for all persons to wear a face mask. In other news, evacuation centers will have designated rooms for persons to quarantine if they develop COVID-19 symptoms. SOCEL's director of the National Emergency Management Organization, NEMO, Michelle Forbes, during a virtual meeting held earlier this week for residents of Georgetown who are in the danger zone of the La Soufrière volcano. Forbes told residents that measures have been put in place since the 2020 hurricane season, and in the event of an evacuation order for La Soufrière volcano, the procedures are there to follow.
Working with the Ministry of Health, and these are the procedures that and guidelines to enter the emergency shelters. Even transportation in the buses, you must have your mask before you can board the bus. When you get to the emergency shelter, you will be your temperature will be checked, you will be registered, and we'll have a bit more robust questioning on your health status. We have been exposed to the virus, or somebody who has been in contact, or have you been in close contact. So asking the shelter, all emergency shelters to have a separate room or section where persons who have flu-like symptoms can be isolated or quarantined until health personnel get.
Forbes said that district officers will also be working closely with NEMO to ensure persons' health and safety are maintained while at the evacuation centers.
Things that during our activation of our emergency shelters, the district health services team also do visit the emergency shelters. They may not be there at the time of registering, but they visit daily at the emergency shelters to really check what is happening. And of course, any unusual high temperatures or anything that is a suspect, that they will be reported by the shelter manager immediately to the district health team. We are also going to equip the shelter managers with PPEs as we're in the COVID environment. That's personal protective equipment, so that they reduce the spread of them actually being affected while serving in the emergency shelters. So these are the procedures that we have had in place since 2020 and will continue into this particular pandemic period.
Meanwhile, persons are reminded to have their emergency kits on standby, even though certain supplies will be provided for them at the designated evacuation centers.
Shelter, you take what you can with you. You take some bedding, you take a little bit of food, you take water, you take your usual supplies, your medicines. When you get there, once we have enough warning time, we will have cots and blankets dispatched to all the emergency shelters. The thing is that a lot of shelters do not have this where you can actually store these items, so they have to be moved in the same time that evacuation is ongoing, and you may not always have the lead time. So you take what you can to the emergency shelter, but the cots and those things will be actually transported into the emergency shelters.
The alert level for La Soufrière volcano remains at orange, and the public is reminded that no evacuation order has been given. The British Virgin Islands, the BVI, has indicated that it stands ready to assist Vincentians in the event of an explosive eruption of La Soufrière, and the country calls for help. Deputy Premier Dr. Natalia Whitley said the BVI has a strong relationship and a strong spirit of cooperation with St. Vincent and the Grenadines, with many nationals living in the BVI. He said while SVG has not indicated that they needed assistance, the BVI stands ready to engage engage once any request has been made. Dr. Whitley did not state whether the BVI would be willing to temporarily house residents of SVG if evacuation orders are issued. So far, St. Lucia has given the assurance that it will be willing to take residents if the volcano forces them to leave their homes. The University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center has advised that based on the complex patterns of previous eruptions, it is too early to conclude that the current activity will remain as it is. There are more than 2,000 Vincentian nationals presently residing in the BVI. Minister of Education Curtis King said that teachers are in a better position now to embrace technology for teaching than when the government introduced the one laptop per child initiative in 2011. Minister King was responded to a question in Parliament yesterday from opposition MP Terence Oliver about the measures put in place for teachers to effectively deliver the curriculum through technology with the delayed opening of schools. Minister King said that teachers have been provided with ongoing training, which has helped to enhance their technology skills and to integrate ICT in the curriculum.
Since that program started in 2011, we have been providing ongoing training for our teachers to integrate ICT in the curriculum. Teachers continue to receive training to improve their knowledge and pedagogical skills in utilizing digital technologies to enhance the delivery of the curriculum. Our teachers are now more willing to embrace technologies in their classrooms than when we started the distribution of laptops in 2011.
Minister King also noted that the Division of Teacher Education has introduced a course in technology for teachers in training.
This course introduces our new teachers to the importance of using modern technologies in the classroom. Recently, and that is to say from April 2020 to up until yesterday, in January 2021, our classroom teachers receive a range of training. These include MSS, that is to say Microsoft Teams platform training, the UE Blackboard, another platform, they receive training in using that also. They were also exposed to technology-enabled learning provided by the Commonwealth of Learning.
The Education Minister was also asked to provide findings of children across St. Vincent and the Grenadines who are without devices, electricity and internet access and are unable to participate in the online classes.
Some 2,402 primary school students had no devices, had no access, to devices. Some 340 households indicated they had no electricity. There were cases where students had access to a device, but it had to be shared with their siblings. In other cases, students, especially at the primary level, relied on using their parents' phones to access online classes. Hence, once their parents were not at home, then their online activities were hampered.
King used the opportunity to highlight some of the measures taken by the government to equip students for the online learning platform.
Of tablets by the government to distribute to students. Presently, we are in the final stage of procuring the additional tablets. In conjunction with the Electrical Inspectorate Division, BRAXA and VINLEC, approximately 340 households were listed to receive electricity under what was considered to be a special program. To date, about 40 households have received electricity. In conjunction with NTRC and Flow, 340 households receive internet connection at a price of 10 EC dollars per month.
Opposition MP for the Southern Grenadines, Terence Oliver, said no child should be left behind, especially on the e-learning platform. Making his contribution to the debate on the 2021 budget estimates, Oliver said that the government should have allocated funds to assist parents who have been facing financial difficulties because of the pandemic so that they can help their children adjust to e-learning.
300 homes. How many students are in these homes? Are still without electricity in order to access e-learning or online learning. Madam Speaker, added to that, we must realize that COVID-19 have placed us in an environment where many of our parents are not working, especially those who are involved in the tourism industry. I have known homes where parents, both parents and bigger siblings, bigger child, have been involved, have lost their employment. So much so that I have gotten calls as to what can be done to assist because I don't want the electricity to cut off. Have we made provisions for those people? Is it allocated in the budget?
Oliver foresees great problems when schools reopen, noting that because some students are unable to participate in the e-learning classroom, they will be behind and teachers will have a challenge on their hands to teach over some of their lessons.
There are some children who are accessing and continue their education because of the online learning, while there are others who are not as fortunate as they. So when you go back to when we resume classes, what is going to happen in some classes? You're going to have students, varying levels in the classroom. Those who would have had that interface facing with their teachers and those who had nothing at all. Because what is also happening, Madam Speaker, up to yesterday I was talking to a parent. This morning, talking to a parent, and what they're saying is that the students, the children, still have to receive the work or they have to use their parents' cell phone.
And several educators spoke to SVG-TV News today via telephone interview on how the transitions from face-to-face teaching to the online platform has affected them, their students, and the learning process. We spoke to teachers from North Central Windward, Central Kingston, Southern Grenadines, and South Leeward who shared varying experiences. High levels of truancy is being reported among students in the Windward and Leeward areas. One teacher at the primary level reported on a 55% participation of her students, while another at the secondary level reported on a consistent 10 to 15% participation of his students.
Percentages of level 55, there will be like 10 out of 18 students. Truancy. The students are not showing up for classes, and the blame not only on the children not being interested, but the ministry not having a campaign right now with the parents to ensure that these students show up for classes. Because of where I teach, we understand that these children come from communities that are the impoverished ones. I've seen students in town selling with their parents. I've seen students in barbershops. I've seen students whose fathers are driving vans. The students are now conductors. For Form 4s, the percentage is about 10%. Yes, we have classes upwards of 27 and 2 students would show up in the lower forms. The upper forms you would expect to be a little bit more responsible. They are just like the lower forms. They don't turn up and they don't care.
The poor level of participation is being blamed on the lack of devices and access to internet for some primary level students. However, for the secondary level students, the teacher reported that students are simply choosing not to participate. Near perfect attendance was reported by other teachers who attributed this to the consistent engagement of parents with the teachers and students. As such, one of the teachers facing consistent truancy is making an appeal to the Ministry of Education and the SVG Teachers Union to launch a campaign targeting parents to get their children to participate in e-learning.
It's about time that they start running ads on radios. During election, we have jeeps coming around with speakers encouraging persons to go out and vote. Let the jeeps come around again and encourage parents to ensure that their children are logging on to classes. Not just say go and log on, because the students are telling lies. The students are telling parents that they are in class when they are not.
While truancy and lack of access to devices and internet poses a threat to e-learning, the teachers also say what is of equal concern is the inability to reach the students who log on and to determine whether the concepts being taught to them are understood and to maintain classroom management.
Students, their learning is effective because sometimes you ask them, they're not responding. Sometimes they're on, but they're not there. They would leave, so they're just hearing you, you're not participating with you. That is like the challenge, really getting the students engaged 100% and not just signing in and saying that they're there and they're somewhere else in the home. You wouldn't know. You can't really supervise them. There's no real classroom management.
The teachers also spoke of an increase in their workloads, strained eyes, and overly engaged parents who interrupt classes to answer questions and inhibit students' ability to fully grasp concepts. The general consensus expressed is that once the COVID-19 numbers can be controlled, a blended approach is recommended in order to close the learning gaps and to ensure that students are actively engaged. In other news, police have arrested and charged Lucina Carter, a 23-year-old domestic of Fitzhugh, with theft of 1,000 EC dollars and 500 Canadian dollars in cash. According to the police, the accused woman allegedly stole the monies from a 60-year-old farmer, also of Fitzhugh, between 4:15 p.m. and 4:48 p.m. last Sunday, January 24th at Fitzhugh. The police have also arrested and charged Suzette Francois, a 37-year-old farmer of the same address, with handling stolen goods. The police say investigations reveal that the accused allegedly knowing or believing that 100 Canadian in cash to be stolen goods dishonestly received same for her own benefit about 4:48 p.m. on Sunday at Fitzhugh. Both accused women are expected to appear before the magistrate court to answer to the charges.